Welcome to the Books Between Friends podcast.
3 lifelong friends,
one shared obsession.
Books.
From epic fantasy to page-turning thrillers.
We dive into the stories we love
And the ones we just can't stop talking about.
So take a seat,
Grab a drink,
and get cozy.
Welcome back, book friends. We're here again with Rachel Peterson, debut author of Killing Sadie, which is out now, available wherever books are sold. Be sure to grab your copy. Before we dive into our conversation today, this is a quick spoiler warning, everyone. We already had a spoiler-free part 1 of this interview, and in this episode, we will deep dive into all the spoilers. So you have been warned. Rachel graduated from Miami University of Ohio with a degree in English and creative writing. Born and raised in Ohio, she started her career in advertising before spending nearly a decade in New York City as a marketing exec for technology companies. An avid traveler, Rachel now splits her time between Manhattan and the Midwest, where she lives with her husband Ken, their dog Olive, and horse Hope. Rachel, we're so excited to have you again. Is there anything else you want to say before we dive into this fantastic episode of Killing Sadie interview?
Thank you all so much for having me. The only thing I have to say is that I am so excited also to get into all of the delicious spoilers.
I'm going to kick it on over to Steph to get us started again.
Okay, so first up, my favorite scene probably in this book. So one of the scenes that really stood out to me was that say anything boombox moment between Ben and Sadie. That scene has always been portrayed to be this grand romantic gesture, right? But when Jane told Detective Budd about it, she made it seem like it was sweet and cute and kind of funny. But then we find out that Sadie's experience of that scene was completely different. So reading it from Sadie's perspective, it really felt so uncomfortable. And especially after Ben kept doing it night after night after she asked him to stop. So I want to know, where do you land on that scene? Like the original scene from the movie. Is it cute and romantic? Or does it cross the line and come across like disrespecting boundaries?
Yes, this is another question. Okay, there were a few in episode 1 we talked about that I was super excited because no one had asked a question like this yet. And this is the first time I get to talk about Say Anything. So I was so excited about this because I should start by saying I am an 80s pop culture aficionado. I adore movies from the 80s. I adore the music. Like, it is my jam.
Yeah.
And so as a movie, I love Say Anything. I had a poster of it on my dorm room in college, which was saying something because like it had come out 20 years before. So most people who stepped into my dorm room were like, who is that? Like, what is this? So as a movie, I adore it.
Yeah.
And I think what was so interesting to me and one of the reasons that I chose that scene as kind of something to pay a sort of twisted homage to, if you will, in this is because within the context of that movie, it is a romance movie. So everything about it is constructed in such a way that this is a story of 2 people who love each other and we want them to overcome the odds and get together in the end. Yeah. And so in the original scene, the context would lead us to believe that, okay, Lloyd, the Lloyd character and the Diane character know one another well enough to know what each one would want or need to feel loved and safe and secure. And so Lloyd knows Diane well enough to think to himself, she would appreciate this grand romantic gesture because she's pulling away and she's scared and she needs proof that I will love her no matter what. So in that context, it is romantic and it's super sweet. And honestly, I would be delighted if my husband, after all of these years of marriage, for some reason also decided that he was going to find a boombox somewhere, first of all, and then hold it up outside the window. I'd be delighted. That would be so sweet. But also the reason that's sweet is because he's my husband. We know each other well.
Yes.
But I think then in the scene where Ben does this for Sadie, the sort of important part about that, he is not doing it because he thinks this is what she needs to feel loved. He's doing it because it's what he needs to feel better about himself. It has nothing to do with her. It has to do with him and his own need to have some very public display to atone for his cheating. It doesn't matter whether he feels bad about it or not. It matters that everyone else thinks he feels bad about it. Yeah. And so it was such an interesting, clear way to represent his character that 2 people can perform the same gesture, but the intent behind that gesture has everything to do with whether it's romantic or creepy or
It makes a
frightening or
lot
weird
of
or
sense,
uncomfortable.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
when I was reading it, I was thinking like, because, you know, you wrote that it was one of her favorite movies. She loved that scene.
Mhm.
But the way that he twisted it and weaponized it against her to break her
Yes.
down was just gross. Like, oh my gosh.
Yes, it was awful. And because everyone else
just
kind of
wouldn't stop.
knows that it's her favorite movie,
Yeah.
he sort of trapped her in her
Yes.
own love
Yeah.
of something and twisted
Yeah.
it and used it against her, but in such a way that, of course, everyone else was like, but she loves this movie, so she must be so charmed.
God.
And it's
Yeah.
just like, it gives me the heebie-jeebies just like thinking
Yeah.
about how awful he is.
Such a
But
big
yeah,
ick.
it was a very
For sure.
important
Yeah.
moment to demonstrate what their relationship really was through her eyes and how different that was from
Yeah.
others' perception of it.
I love that. Yeah, the public perception there. That was really interesting. Okay, we talked about this prior in our first episode as well, but I feel like these characters are very complex, and some would say morally gray. But even with that said, do you think there is one character in particular that you think readers will misunderstand, and why do you think that is?
Yes. So I think the character of Liz is probably the one who even I've heard the most wildly disparate points of view about from readers. Which was very interesting. Some readers absolutely love her and are like, we're rooting for you, Liz. And others are like, they have zero patience for her. And so that was really interesting to me because I think she has so many different elements and layers to the motives of what she has done and why she's doing what she's doing. And I think the real question for her is whether her actions are coming from a place of malicious intent or if they're just coming from sort of this sense of abandonment and this need to like prove herself and somehow attach herself to some way out of the life that she's living. So I think she's one that is the most perhaps complicated, certainly one that I had a hard time, and since we're chatting spoilers, but originally Liz was just going to be sort of, you know, left and off she goes into the wild and you just kind of hope that she figures her stuff out. But I could not leave her that way. Like I couldn't leave her that way, which is why there is the exchange between her and Detective Bud toward the very end, which is just Detective Bud saying like, you know, do you have someone you can call or like, you know, you're going to be okay. That was definitely an interesting moment for me that it was the first time I had written a character and I was like, oh, and then like off she goes and, you know, tears hoping. And I was like, I can't do this to her. Like I can't leave her this way because she is, as we talked about in an earlier episode, there are many elements of her that reminded me of myself. So in some way I was probably trying to also tell the kid I was and any other kid who's ever felt that way, like, hey, even if many of the adults in your life are not caring or they're not, you know, trustworthy, like that there is always someone somewhere who does care about what happens to you. So I realized that was
Totally.
I answered that and then also took another winding road. But
No,
that
you
was
definitely
just a
did.
very interesting element of the story that I didn't expect.
I love that.
No, I could definitely see her as being one of the most misunderstood. Like, you want to hate her just because of how she's coming off, but she has, like, this big background that you really have to understand to be able to understand her, you know?
Yeah, her walls are definitely up for a reason.
Yeah, her personal experiences
Yes.
have definitely shaped how she acted towards others, and I loved seeing that come through on the page.
Amazing. I love to hear that.
Okay, so one thing I found myself wondering was about Jane's motivation. So first, let me tell you, I did not guess that she was the killer. So I always pride myself.
Okay.
I always pride myself in figuring out thrillers. I'm like, oh, I caught it really like early on. This one I did not. So I did not expect that. But I was wondering more about her motivation. So like when I was reading about this, you know, I thought that maybe, so when you revealed Sadie's POV, we got more about, you know, Sadie and Mason and then Mason and Jane and, you know, that, you know, Jane had a thing for Mason, but Mason really wanted to be with Sadie. So I kind of thought that that would tie into the motivation where like, you know, she became jealous of her twin sister. So she just kind of wanted to take her out. So, right?
As you do.
As one does. As who among us, you know?
Or I thought that maybe she pushed Mason to kill Sadie because I still thought it was Mason. I thought he was still the killer.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that too.
So I really thought that maybe she did something to him or like said something to him to really push him to the edge, right? Or that she outed him because she, that Sadie was going to end up going back with Ben. So I thought that was the motivation, but can you tell us about how you developed Jane's motivation and why you ultimately chose that direction for her?
Yes. So there are a few elements of it. And sort of the simplest baseline element is this is a person who is not, mentally they don't exist in the same way that the other characters in this story do, which in part, I have a deep love of, old camp thrillers, campy B horror movies, etc. So there was an element of this that I was always drawing back to, that is that there's always a character or like Scream, the movie where you're just you're just doing this because you can. I mean, what?
Yeah. So you're just
there is
not the same.
There is an element of Jane that is doing this because she can't. But where that comes from, and you sort of see that come out a bit with her text exchanges.
Yes. Which I loved.
With Evan later on.
Evan.
Oh, we're gonna talk more about Evan.
We'll get to Evan, yeah.
So the other piece, though, and this is what's sort of peppered in, there are bits in Jane's story where we learn she was very obsessed with, these beautiful people who died young in these tragic ways. You talk about Marilyn Monroe, her obsession with James Dean, that her parents didn't know what to do with her because they have this kid who's just obsessed with old Hollywood death. And that also comes into this idea of almost romanticizing the idea of what a death like that is. And then you combine also Jane's own interest in photography, that it was almost for her an experiment. Because first, she doesn't have any respect for Sadie's dreams. Or she's like, my sister literally doesn't want to do anything except go to college, marry her high school sweetheart, come back here and have a couple of kids.
Yes.
And to Jane, that is anathema of everything that Jane is. And so there is also this very deep level of distaste for her sister and just this why on earth would you waste your life doing this? And so in Jane's mind, she's just like, oh, well, why bother with the life? Because you've already apparently decided for that this is what it's going to be, and you have your whole little plan. So poof.
Interesting.
It's nothing.
There's no value there for her.
Yes.
See that? See it?
So yeah, it's a very
Interesting.
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
very interesting.
like a very odd person saying that out loud, because that's my dark twisty process of she's like, well then what's the point? But that's how Jane's mind works. And it's interesting because there's also, there are elements in there she talks about how Jane really loves Gone with the Wind. This movie, which is a deeply problematic film. And in her mind, this character of Scarlett O'Hara, who if you were to watch that film, is a horrendous, self-serving, maniacal woman who literally she destroys anything and everyone that gets in her way. To Jane, that is what a hero looks like. To Jane, this is not a horrifying film. This is a movie about, wow, look at how that woman just systematically takes down every single person who gets in her way and then stands victoriously alone at the end of that movie.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that was another interesting element of you're looking at this and you're like, this is, how on earth could someone possibly misconstrue this as being good? Any part of it as being good.
Right.
But to Jane's mind, it is. And so that was another interesting element. There were a lot of those sort of little bits and pieces playing into her psychology.
So really funny. Okay, so Stephanie read it first, and then I read it right after her. And I was texting her about it, and I told her, I was like, man, these characters kind of suck. They're so mean to each other. They're wow. And oh, no. I said, Liz sucks. That's what I said. And then she goes, no, all the characters do. And I said, no, Jane doesn't seem so bad.
I think I just sent her eyeballs.
You're like
oh.
So mission accomplished. Yeah.
Yes, everyone. It's funny to quote my wonderful mother, who read an early copy of the book and then texted me and said, "Everyone is so awful, in their own unique ways."
Yeah,
I was like, "Thank you, Mom. You're right. They are
exactly."
Yeah, that's so funny because I said it so early on. I was like, Jane doesn't seem so bad though.
Jane seems fine. She's just having a hard time with things.
Yeah.
Understandably.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I want to be sure I told you that because that was funny.
It was funny. When you texted
that's
me that, I
fantastic.
think I actually laughed out loud.
Amazing.
Okay, so one question I kept coming back to was why Mr. Carrera asked Detective Budd to get involved. I found myself wondering if she was there to help Ben get away with killing Mason or not. And I wonder how she actually felt about Mr. Carrera back in the day when he was under investigation for the death of his brother. You know, in the book, we find that she seemed to be the only detective who was like pleading his innocence, but now I question whether or not that was genuine. So how should we interpret her role in all of this as readers?
This was a big question.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I am very, very pumped about this question as well. So
Okay.
what I can tell you is that Ben's dad was not the one who killed his own brother. And so he brings in the one detective who believed him back then because he believes, of course, that his son, this happened in self-defense. And so he's going to bring in the one person he trusts because the whole department let him down. You know, when he was young, they didn't believe him. And so he wants to bring in this one person who did believe him in the hopes that this person can, you know, right the situation, defend Ben, and kind of, you know, make all of this go away in the most neat and tidy way possible. And what was really important about that, and this was a decision that kind of was made throughout the writing process of whether or not Donovan Carrera really was the one who killed his brother or not, that it is important that Ben really think his dad did it. And he's kind of proud of that, right? We get that from him.
Right.
That he's like, well, I'm Donovan Carrera's son, and like, look, my dad did what he had to do, and so I just did the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the other reason that he gets so combative and angry dealing with Detective Budd is that he's like, wait, well, what? Wait, no, because my dad killed someone and my dad's fine. So if I killed someone, I'm fine too.
Yeah.
Right.
But what if you're telling me my dad, like, what if he actually didn't do it? And that really leads to this complete breakdown and spiraling out for Ben.
Right. Okay.
So that was a very important element. Detective Budd also did not exist in the first iteration of like the sort of story map we had for this. She just came to me one afternoon while I was writing because I was looking for a way for us to see how Ben responds when his authority is questioned by a female figure. And all of these detectives were male.
Absolutely.
And so I was like, what is a good way for us to see how does he change? And then I had this idea of, you know, what if we do bring in a female detective who has high-ranking authority, right, and was called in by his own father in an attempt to help, and he just cannot handle this, like, comfort. He can't handle it, and to him, he doesn't understand how his dad could have a respectful relationship with this woman, so he's like, he must be, like, he's pulling something over on her. Like, the only, you know, he must be in control of this situation. And so that was a really interesting element, and if I have my way, I have a whole... I know what really happened to Ben's uncle, and I would love nothing more than for there to potentially be a future story in which we get to explore that.
I was wondering that,
Because it is it lives rent-free in my mind.
We were actually
And
wondering
it would
about
be
that.
amazing to explore that further because,
Absolutely.
you know, it's juicy. It's juicy. It's not his own brother who did it.
Fantastic. Right. Well, for me in the story, I immediately latched on to the idea of twins. And so I don't know if it was me and I started noticing at one point and just ran with it after I started noticing it. But when the POVs were switching, I noticed that during Liz's POV, Jane always referred to Liz as Lizzie. But when we switch back to Jane's POV, in her internal thought, she refers to her as Liz. And so to me, because what I was thinking is that there was a little switcheroo and that Jane was the one that was actually the victim, and Sadie had taken her place.
I thought that too.
That's
good.
Theory.
For a second.
And so I was like, was that an intentional red herring to kind of throw us off?
I love that idea. It was not, but I love that idea. And it is funny because one of the things I kept thinking about, I'm like, it is a natural thing to assume when you have two identical twins to like at some point wonder, is the one who's dead really the one who is is dead? Yeah. But my thinking behind that was more so to show us how the two characters think. So for Liz, like she really dislikes Jane and she knows that Jane dislikes her. So in her mind, everything that Jane says to her has an element of distaste to it. And like, she's always calling me Lizzie just because she knows that I hate being called Lizzie.
Right.
And then when we switch over to Jane, because Jane only ever thinks of her as Liz, the only reason she calls her Lizzie is intentionally because she knows it bothers her. So it was designed to both make you think that like Liz is overreacting a bit. Like you're like, Jane seems fine and she's just calling you Lizzie. Why are you freaking out about this? Like it shouldn't matter. But then you realize that Jane actually is doing it intentionally just to piss her off. Okay. And so it was more of just like a little element of Jane being Jane, and she's like, you hate this, so I'm gonna do it. Yeah. But like, not even because it comes naturally to her to think of her as Lizzie, just like she knows if she calls her that out loud, it annoys her.
So it's
so she does it
for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought at one point, whenever there was emphasis on the whole fact that they do dress alike sometimes, I thought that because there was emphasis on that, that maybe we were looking at Sadie instead of Jane in the, interrogation room. So I was like, okay, so maybe we do have a little
one of the
switcheroo.
other red herrings was that they are dressing alike, and then also to add the complexity of, well, Jane's never had these parties, so like you would think if you saw her that it was Sadie. So it was all kind of designed to create a bit of that sense of confusion, or like you think it's Sadie who is dead, right? But was it? So that's kind of like a fun line of questioning that I want readers to go down as they're going like, but they do dress alike. Is it really who I think it is, or is it the other twin?
Well, you had me, so I was definitely thinking that. Yeah.
I had that theory too. So it works.
All right, so I want to know, was Ben on it the entire time? Obviously, Ben and Jane's stories were clearly aligned, which is actually what made me suspect that Liz was the only one who was actually telling the right story. But I wasn't sure if Ben and Jane had been planning this for a while, or if Jane only included him the day of the party, then just decided to make out with him. Because she also made the comment to Evan that he was a good little helper. So to me, it was just unclear, like, was he in on it the entire time? Just at the party? Have they been like hooking up this entire time? Or was it just like her messing with Sadie that day? Like,
yes.
What can you tell us?
He was not part of the whole original plan, because really the whole original plan came about through Jane and Evan and kind of their conversations and Evan egging Jane on and doing this. However, Jane kind of figured as she started to craft this plan that it would be very helpful if she had someone else along. And also she's a practical killer. So she's like, well, he's larger than I am and could probably carry more weight if needed. And so she brought him in to it kind of as she was beginning to craft it, and then allowed that to come up to a fever pitch heading into the evening of the party. But I think what was fun for me, if I could say fun, about writing that in is, here is Ben this whole time so obsessed with being the one in control of whatever his given situation is, and is specifically not yielding control to Detective Bud and not allowing this. And yet he has been completely taken for a ride by Jane. Like, he is just this, puppy dog. Like, she's just kind of plucked him, was like, this guy is so easy to play. All I have to do is make him feel special, and he'll literally kill for me. So it was also this interesting kind of twist of poetic justice, if you will, that Ben, thinking that he was in control this whole time, was so easily sucked into doing this. And that's also where I think you start to see kind of his panic, and sort of as the questioning goes on, that he's starting to wonder, wait, maybe I was not as in control of this as I thought. Like, Jane said this was going to be fine.
Yeah.
Why is that's just why he's like, you talk to Jane? Didn't she tell you? Right. Because he and Jane were like, she told me that she would have the same story. So he's like really kind of starting to get panicked about that. But so he just, he was a pawn. He was a pawn, and he'll never admit to it, because he can never admit that he was second to anyone else's ideas. Anything that he does is his own idea that he must own.
Oh, Ben.
I know. Oh, God, poor sucker. Really?
Yes, definitely.
Do I feel sorry for him? No.
No.
Well, speaking of Evan, I have to ask about Evan, because I was suspicious of him the whole time. At one point, I actually had a theory that Evan was actually Ben. So along the same lines as Jen's theory that he was in on it the whole time. And, obviously now we know that's not the case. So did you intentionally put Evan in there as like, oh, is this Evan? Is this someone else? Like, who is this nebulous Evan character?
Yes. So I did create him in such a way that he would be entirely, quote unquote, off screen the whole time.
Yeah.
So it was designed in a way for you as the reader to wonder, like, is this guy actually even real?
Real.
Like, is he someone else who we don't like? Is this a real person or what?
Right.
And so that was by design, but my sort of creation of Evan, who also was not part of the original kind of idea. It's just like he kind of popped up and I was like, what if Jane has a friend who thinks the same way she does? And we will, I have Jane and Evan have other adventures yet to be had. Again, fingers crossed that I would love to bring into the page that this is not the last of Evan.
Love it.
But I think my thinking behind the Jane Evan dynamic was sort of like the movie from the 90s, Cruel Intentions, with Sarah Michelle Gellar and Reese Witherspoon and Ryan Phillippe.
Yes.
I needed or wanted to give Jane a partner in this who did think the same way that she did, just because it is more fun to me when you can see a character like that interacting with another character like that. You don't only want to see them interacting with normal human beings, because they do have to pretend to a certain extent to be normal when they're having those interactions. But if they have someone else that they can sort of be their quote unquote true selves with, then it really allows for a layer of kind of an extra feeling of disturbance, I guess, to see that unfold. And so then to come to the very end also, and it was an idea from relatively early on, once Evan came into existence, that everything would come through in these text messages at the very end. When you realize, like, they've been talking the whole time. Like, when Liz was talking about it, and when this and this and this, it was always Jane and Evan talking to each other.
Yeah.
So that was a really fun element, and that was something that, like, I knew was going to come about and hopefully provide, I mean, on the one hand, like, I hesitate to say closure because it's still infuriating, but also, like, you close the book and you're like, oh, what did I just read?
Yes.
Like, are we going to get more of that? Like, what?
That's what I was thinking.
Like, what else is going on with these two?
Yes.
So,
like,
but I
they're
do
so
love
crazy.
the theory of, like, I loved the theory of Evan actually being Ben. I thought when I read that, I was like, oh, that's another one where I'm like, ooh, that would have been brilliant too. Like, we could have definitely made that work.
See, I didn't think that it was Ben, but I thought it was someone that we had met in the story already, and Evan would be revealed at maybe in a later book,
Yes.
Well, then, like, hearing that now, it makes me wonder, would Jane have, like, taken it to this extreme if not for Evan? Because it seems like they were kind of
feeding off each other.
Yes,
feeding
that
off
is
of
a
each
big
other
question.
and egging each other on.
Yes. And that also is why I so hope that we get to have more Jane and Evan, because it is an interesting question of, once again, it's almost this, it's like one of those little nesting dolls that you keep opening it and opening it, because you have, like, Ben, who thought he was in control, but actually Jane was the one controlling him. And then you have Jane, who thinks that she's in control, but is Evan actually the one controlling him? Like, it goes all the way to the top. So that is such a fun thing to play with that I will hopefully be able to deliver more of.
Well, and honestly, going back to the text messages that you talked about, like, it just revealed just how crazy and how much Jane did that I didn't even, like, pick up on. I was like, she did all of that?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was insane.
Exactly. It's
You
very
orchestrated a
disturbing
lot.
to realize all of these, and again, that it was all just for fun.
Yeah.
She was bored on spring break.
Yeah.
So she thought it would be entertaining
Yeah.
to drug her sister's friend. I mean,
Wild.
whose mind works that way? Jane's does. I promise
Jane's.
mine doesn't. Even though I wrote Jane, I promise my mind doesn't work that way. But it was really curious to, especially as I was writing those scenes, because of course I know what's coming, and alone in my little writer's nook, I'm like, we'll never suspect until the very end.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of moments like that, there are many moments in this book where I needed to put it down and give it a little side eye, like suspicious side eye. Is there a specific moment where you thought to yourself, my gosh, the readers are going to yell at me for this one?
There were a few, among them the end.
Yeah.
And I say this, being an avid reader of thrillers, like, even the thrillers I love the most, sometimes I get to the end and I'm like, no, no, like I do not accept this. This is not what I thought the ending, this is not what I saw coming. And so I think the end of any good thriller is polarizing, and I'm sure some people will really want to throw this book across the room when they get to the end. Or hopefully then go like scurry over and pick it back up and then start going through to see what they missed, like where were the these clues of Jane's actions and stuff. But I think too, when you finally get to Sadie's portion, like my sort of hope or intent in writing that, because there was also not an original plan that we were going to hear from her. And then it was all going to just come out through, what we see these other characters doing. But then it became so natural. Everyone's so unreliable that we needed that source of truth, even like not necessarily emotionally, because of course Sadie still has her own perception of the people around her, but what physically happened that night. Like now you know.
Mm-hmm.
But there were elements when I was writing her where even I was like, girl, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I'm writing it and I'm like, no. Like, just dump Ben. Just break up. Yeah. What are you doing? Like, why are you spinning this elaborate? What? So there were some very infuriating moments. And then also just with Liz, because as we've said, some of her actions were not her own responsibility. They were the result of Jane's interventions. But then there were some things that she decided to do.
Yeah.
And keep doing of her own free will that I was like, I want so much better for you. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? Why? So there were definitely some of those. And of course, like, this list is long. But I would be remiss to if we didn't touch briefly on our adults. Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, Stephen and Carly.
The adults.
Oh my gosh.
Because we had a whole conversation about the adults.
Yeah.
We did.
Because, like, Stephen Cooper, just.
I know.
What are we doing?
I'm like, what? What are you doing? What is wrong with you?
It's still happening, too.
Yes, even after. And that's what I appreciate this because it was sort of like talking about people even though you don't know. I'm like, it's still happening even after she told you not with the girls. It's so hard for you to not attempt to actively cheat on your wife when you are on vacation with your daughters and your wife.
In your face.
What? Yeah. Anyway, again, he's a fictional human being, but I was so I'm like, you are disgusting. Anyway, and then you can also kind of see how perhaps Sadie's relationship with Ben is on the road to being very similar to the relationship that her parents had.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which was a curious kind of continuation of like the problematic nature of what Sadie and Ben had.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you mentioned the ending because I feel like the ending left me wondering about the future of the investigation. So like to me when I finished this book, I was like, wait, but what about the investigation? Like what happened with that? They just asked a bunch of questions, but then what now? So was that intentionally left open because you wanted readers to draw their own conclusions? Or is there more to that story that you hope to explore one day?
I certainly hope to explore more. As we talked about, particularly the context of Jane and Evan and the Carrera family and that history. But I want to explore those things sort of outside of the context of this. So the interesting thing about this whole book in the ending, like the police don't come away from talking to these teens with any different idea than what they know to be true, which is there's nothing they've been given to think that anything other than what they know to be true is true. That, Mason killed Sadie, and then Ben killed Mason in self-defense. Yeah. And that's what was so interesting about this is because the point of the investigation is they're trying to understand how these two teens who, as far as anyone knew, like, they don't know each other. How did this happen? Is there something bigger we're missing? Do we need... So they are asking questions of the people who were closest to the situation. But in my mind, and the reader can draw their own conclusion because just because I think what happened, that doesn't mean that it is what happened. But in my mind, almost the most kind of hard-hitting fact about this is they all just walk off. Like Jane just goes right back to her life now as an only child. Ben gets away. Like everyone gets away with it because there is nothing left for the police to ask questions about. Which was super interesting to me. That just, I guess it's a shut case. I guess we'll just have to accept that it happened the way it happened.
The way they said it happened.
Yeah, it just left me wondering. I'm like, okay, well, what happened?
Well, and I do love the idea, like, and Sadie hints at this, that her phone is still out there somewhere. The old phone that she was using to communicate with Mason.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, Liz's necklace is somewhere out there. So there are these elements that, like, are, if this were a movie, I could envision that you would see Jane and Ben, you know, walking out of the police station together, and then we would fade over to, like, Sadie's old flip phone, like, half buried in the dirt at the farm. And, like, maybe the
Love it.
screen would light up. And you're like,
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
and then cut to black.
I love that, actually.
So there I know.
Make that happen.
Shot for shot. Yes, please.
Okay, book friends, that was the end of our second bonus episode with Rachel Peterson. Rachel, again, thank you so much for joining us and becoming one of our newest book friends.
Oh,
Yes,
it was
thank
my
you.
pleasure. I am thrilled to be here.
Rachel, could you please let our listeners know where they can find you and how they can get their hands on their very own copy of Killing Sadie?
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me at Rachel Peterson Author on Instagram and rachelpetersonauthor.com. You can also find a copy of Killing Sadie anywhere books are sold. And if you have already read it, which perhaps you have if you're listening to this episode, you definitely want to pick up a copy for a couple of your closest friends so that you can talk about it with the same level of enthusiasm that we all just did.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and are there any events that you'd like to plug also coming up? So this episode is going to come out on the 10th.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, so you can find me next on September 11th at Talking Animals Books in Grapevine, Texas, in conversation with the fabulous Katie Burnett, and it would be amazing to see you all there.
That's a wrap for Books Between Friends today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next chapter.